Welcome back to the Star Wars Newsnet YouTube channel. As always, my name is Tyler here with Luke. Check out everything on Star Wars Newsnet for everything Star Wars. Today, though, we're talking about the maker himself. Recently, not too long ago at this point, at Cannes Film Festival, George Lucas gave some interesting comments about Disney Star Wars, about the future of cinema. He reminisced a little bit about what it was like when Star Wars first came out. Like, he talked about making sandcastles on the beach with Steven Spielberg. I thought that was fantastic. We're gonna kind of break down some of the comments that George made. And we had some stuff on this on the Star Wars Newsnet. If you go back and look at one of our pieces on Sunday, Miguel writes a Galaxy in a Far, Far Away piece every week. He talks about this a little bit. I felt like George Lucas does not speak out very often, and there's not a mic in front of him very often. So getting anything we get from the man who started all of this, I think is worth having a conversation about, especially when he's entered the stage that he's in of, you know what, my legacy is established. Like, my work is going to live on forever. I'm 80 years old. Let me just kind of give you what I think and tell you how I feel. So, Luke, you ready to jump into some George Lucas conversation?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay, so I'm going to read just a couple quotes here. This is the first one that we're going to get into. He was talking about what it was like, when he understood Star Wars, he created it, and then what it was like when he sold it to Disney and what happened afterwards. So I was the one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world, because there's a lot to it. Nobody understood the Force. When they started other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the original sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. You give it up, you give it up. The new films have a lot of talent, great ideas, and production. I feel like they come from my children, and sometimes it hurts a little when they grow up and get away from you. So a few things with that. One, he does talk about, I do genuinely believe that no one really understands the Force like George Lucas. I mean, he created the Force, and I think it's safe to say that
Yeah.
no one probably understands exactly what the Force is. We're still having these debates about it to this day. I will also say that I always wonder how George really feels about some of these Disney projects. I think it's definitely kind of like this quote says, a mixed bag, because
hmm
he talks about some of the things that got away from the original concepts, original ideas. But I do think he has, he enjoys seeing his work lived on, the way it has. He's also Disney's biggest stockholder, I think. So he obviously can't go and trash anything that's happened. But see,
Exactly.
I like the
Yeah.
Disney films too. So I'm not here to say that. So, and then the interesting part was I feel like they come from my children, and sometimes it hurts a little when they grow up and get away from you. What's your general takeaway from George Lucas's comments right there?
Um, you know, so he has the perspective of being a parent, and I think he can easily kind of juxtapose those two of like this thing that he created that was his baby, Star Wars, this whole franchise, and so also his son who has his children that have grown up and moved on out of his house and stuff. So I think it's an easy comparison for him. I don't have kids of my own, so I don't relate as hard, but I can definitely see where he's coming from. Like, he created this thing, he breathed the life into Star Wars, this whole franchise, these 6 movies and shows, and so it is tough. No, even if I think Disney would have gone on and done maybe exactly what he wanted, it
Right.
still would be tough that his name isn't like George Lucas did this. Like,
Right.
this is Disney Star Wars. So
Based off of the story
yeah,
created by George Lucas, the
yeah.
characters, the
So
universe.
I think no matter what the movies turned out to be, which you and I are pretty big fans of what Disney has done with Star Wars. So I don't think it matters heavily
Okay.
how they are received or anything. I think he just is like in the space where he's like, those were my babies, and now they're kind of flying the coop. They're leaving, and
Look, I saw people take this
yeah.
two different ways with that comment about my children and my children that hurts when they grow up and get away from you a little bit. I've seen some people think he's talking about actual people like Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, some people that have worked on the films with him and Clone Wars with him,
Yeah.
and those people taking his projects and doing things that don't necessarily align with what his vision was, and how it might hurt a little bit when you see individuals do that, and like they grow up and get away from you a little bit. Like you can't like hover over and make sure every decision's the way you want it to be. And then I've also seen people kind of take the approach that I believe you were taking there. And I think I align more with what you were saying, which was he looked at original Star Wars and the original concepts as his children, and the ideas maybe he had for future stories they might tell as his
Mhm.
children. And as the stories have gone along, the Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy, probably different version of what's going to happen in George Lucas's version, or just in general, Palpatine coming back and doing this. Like that's probably, it
Yeah.
probably doesn't happen in George Lucas's vision there. And there's lots of different things with technical things that change or might have changed that I think is less about, oh, maybe these creatives are going away from what I wanted them to do and what I was hoping and told them I wanted them to do, and are doing their own thing, but more about like, oh man, like it's interesting because you sit there and he's probably thinking like, would I have had Leia do that, or would I have
Mhm.
had R2D2 make that beeping noise in that way at that moment? Like I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's one of those interesting things that I think more so than any other human in the entire world, I would love to get like truth serum into George Lucas. And
Yes.
because he's not to be one of those people that's like, do you hate Disney Star Wars? Because I don't want to ask that. I'm not interested in that. But more so, I want to give you truth serum, to have you spill the tea on everything with the Force, everything that you were planning. Because I feel like there's different versions we hear of different things all the
Yeah,
time,
exactly.
like of what might have happened or what was possibly being planned. Like I would just love some truth serum there. But I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of the other side of that argument, that think he's talking about maybe like Kathleen Kennedy being the children. Do you think that argument, how much weight do you think that argument holds?
I think there's a little bit there. I mean, I'm not gonna be naive and think that he was only speaking from a very fond, positive side of it. I think that would be the side that holds more weight. I would hope it would be. But
Okay.
obviously, with I mean, just the amount of projects that have come out since Disney has taken over, there's got to be, one or two or however many that have done something in Star Wars in the universe that he disagreed with.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
so, that's definitely happened. That
Mhm.
has to have happened. So, and he's like the one person who has the right to be like, that's not how I would have done it. That's not how it should have been done.
Right.
So I think he's the one person that I would hear that from, that I would love to, get granular with him on just some stuff that is
Right.
small and just give him some
You're
truth
telling
serum and
me
listen.
that at Joe Schmo 6284, when they tweet at Disney saying that they've ruined Star Wars with their agenda, you're telling me that you're not really taking that person's opinion on what is or isn't Star Wars with the same level of, you know, belief that you would when George Lucas says
Yes,
something.
somehow user 42 and George Lucas are just a little bit different in my
Just a little
mind.
bit, just a little bit. It is curious because there are segments of the fandom that I would say segments of the fandom that are very adamant that about what George Lucas Star Wars is and what Disney Star Wars is, and that we
Yeah.
don't just have Star Wars, and that's probably always going to exist to some degree. Now, a lot of those people are the same people that probably hated, Lucas Star Wars when the prequels came out at times, but I do think it's an
Likely.
interesting conversation. Like, I would love to hear him expand, like, on his thoughts more about, like, what Disney has done. But obviously, being, so invested in Disney, he can't come out and be super negative. But I think, like, with anything, he can come out and take a measured approach and say what he wants to. But, like, George
Yeah.
he owes nothing to anyone at this point. So
Yeah, exactly.
anytime he speaks, I just take it as like a moment where we can be appreciative of this time that we have to listen to him, at 80 years old. I do really hope that Star Wars Celebration, the 50-year anniversary in 2027, I really hope he makes an appearance. Like I
Oh, I
really
really hope
hope.
so.
He doesn't really go to cons, he doesn't go to these things like the celebrations. But for the 50-year anniversary, I really hope they have like he agrees to come back, because if he wants to or he agrees to it, like they'll bring him out, like they'll bring
Yeah.
him there, they'll do anything they can, they'll do anything he wants. It would just be really incredible if he came back out for like a nice little fan fest session, a sit down panel. Like if you just think about if they could bring him and Mark and Harrison out to, or Anthony Daniels and some of the other creatives, that were a part of this, bring Spielberg in, to hang out too, and just do all of
Yeah,
that. But
exactly.
any other
I'm
comments on
actually
that before we move on to one of his
you were
other
just
quotes?
talking about the OG cast of people that they could bring back. Is Ralph McQuarrie still with us? I'm not sure.
I don't
Is
think
he
so.
still alive?
I don't think so.
He's probably, a little older, but I was listening to this interview with George, and I didn't realize how completely instrumental Ralph McQuarrie was to this
Ralph
whole.
McQuarrie, rest in peace, died in 2012.
Okay, so he's been, with the Force for a while. But yeah, I mean, George needed him to create these paintings and pictures
Right.
just to get the movie made. So I think he would have been cool to have. But yeah, I would love for this OG
who
cast to
else
come
was
back.
wonder who else was working on some of that concept art that might still be around, or maybe we go prequels, because those people would probably still be like more prevalent, more able to speak at this point. That would be interesting. Another quote that George had, that I thought was really interesting, talking about the future. He was asked, like, what does cinema look like in like 10 years? And
Yes.
he said that it's going to look the exact same it does now. And he said the big studios just want something that's like something they've seen, because
Hmm.
they don't have the imagination to see something that isn't there. That's the quote. I think beyond that, what he's trying to speak into is a lack of risk taking as well that exists with these studios. And I think that's inherent in the quote, is they just want something that they've seen before because they know that that's going to sell well. Like, we're just going to stick with this IP that everyone knows, retell a story that everyone knows, and do that. And I think a great example of that is The Force Awakens, and how
Yeah.
it was, I think, perfect for the time, like 2015, like the return of Star Wars. I think it was perfect for that time. But when you think back on the return to Star Wars, it didn't necessarily expand the lore or expand much of the franchise, and it was like a safe return to Star Wars. We're removed from that now by several years, and I'm looking at the scope of cinema. A lot of it is, franchise prequels, or we're going to retell this story, we're going to remake this movie, or, oh, this is just like that movie, we're going to do it again. And
Yeah.
like the other day, I saw that Austin Butler was in talks to reprise like a lead role, or not reprise. He was in talks to be the lead for a new Pirates of the Caribbean
Yeah, I saw that
movie.
too.
And it's like Pirates of the Caribbean 6 now that will
Yeah.
be on. And I'm just wondering, at what is there ever going to be a breaking point for studios where they're like, we need to take a risk? When you think about the legacy of George Lucas, he talked about like films like American Graffiti and Star Wars too, that they were almost didn't get made, and it took a executive taking a risk, taking a chance on this young filmmaker that they really they saw a lot of promise in, and believing in the story to give it a chance. So my question to you, one, what do you think about George's comment there? And we'll start with that. This blanket statement.
I mean, I think he nailed it. I also look at the movies that are just coming out in the past couple of years and scheduled to for the next couple. And yeah, like a lot of the ones that are on the schedule are just sequel or a remake of something that's been going on for a while. So yeah, I think he's nailing it. That it makes me actually really glad about The Acolyte, because that feels like something that is fresh and brand new, that is kind of a risk that Star Wars is taking. It's outside the Skywalker saga. So I can also see how The Force Awakens was a safe movie. I thought it was good, but yeah,
I really like Force Awakens.
Yeah, exactly. I do too. But yeah, he's absolutely right. We need to see a little bit more risk taking from these major executive.
So what does that look like? Well, one thing I think is interesting, what was the most popular movie of 2023?
what is the actual statistically
Like,
correct
just
answer?
tell me, like, what was the most popular movie last year? Like,
Well, I would say it would be Barbie.
yes, 100%.
Yeah,
And that was about a original, unique
yeah,
story as you could have, and it was an absolute smash hit. Now, there are circumstances around Barbie, just the Barbenheimer stuff and the whole phenomenon, like an event that turned into that
yeah,
helped. But when you think about it, Barbie had legs. Like it was the next Oscars. Like people still love that movie. It's going to be something that is going to stick around for a while. Like original thinking. I think about when A Quiet Place came out from John
ooh,
Krasinski, and how it was so interesting to go see a movie in 19, I think it was, or 2018, I think it was.
yeah,
And you're seeing this movie in 2018 that it was almost like a callback to silent films, because you didn't hear anything for most of the movie, but whenever you did, like obviously not silent films anymore, but like when you did, it was like, oh my gosh, like you're actually going
yeah,
to the movies afraid to hear anything. And obviously they're doing A Quiet Place day one that comes out at the end of that this comes out at the end of June. Obviously there's other creative original movies. I don't know why I just thought of like those two off the top of my head, probably because
those are
that
good
one comes
ones.
out soon. And
Yeah,
but there is a case to be made for these original ideas when they hit, like they hit like really well. And when are we going to get to a point where we see studios start to take more risks again? And part of this is I wonder how much streaming has to do with this, because a lot of these studios are bleeding money because of streaming, but
exactly.
and then their movies aren't necessarily having the big hits because people are waiting for the streaming. But because they're waiting for the streaming, they're not getting the big hits. And obviously, COVID and the strikes have had a lot to do with all of this. And I think most recently we saw like Hunger Games, like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a prequel, which I really, enjoyed that movie a lot, but it
Hmm.
didn't do quite as well in the box office. It's like a prequel of something we've already seen. Most notably like Furiosa just came out and is not doing well at the box office. A prequel of a action, franchise. Last installment was 10 years ago.
Mm,
I wonder when we're going to start seeing people take those risks on creative movies again. But part of it is the movie industry has to adapt to how people are viewing movies nowadays. I
yeah,
would This is like different. This is a branch off from I think what George was wanting to say, because he was talking about like the imagination aspect of seeing something that
yes,
isn't there. But people today, I think COVID obviously was the breaking point for this. This was like a trend, I think, that was happening. COVID happens, and suddenly we are now conditioned. Most people are conditioned to you can't go to the theaters anymore, but the studios are dropping their stuff on their streaming platforms. And so now it's like, oh, if I don't go see this movie, it's going to be available on digital in 2 weeks. Like I think
2 weeks like
about some
Fall
movies,
Guys.
yeah, like Fall Guy. And I wonder, how do we get back to the point where we entice people to go to the theater again? Like there's all sorts of different subscriptions and different ways. Like seeing a movie is easier than ever before. But if you're a family of four, you can't afford to pay, $80 a month
Oh
for
yeah,
a movie subscription for your family to go to the movies. That's $80 a month. But if you go to the movies once a month and you buy all those tickets, and if you get any snacks, you're paying like $100 right there for
yeah,
a family of four for the movies. And so some of this is like economics and everything. But
exactly.
I'm curious what you think. What is the state of like movie watchers in correlation to the lack of imagination that's in movies? Because we want more original content, but then you get like a really fun action romance like summer blockbuster like Fall Guy, and no one goes to go see it.
Yeah. I wish I had like the answer of like why is this happening? I don't know, because I mean it has Ryan Gosling, right?
Right. Oh, it's like Ryan
And
Gosling, Emily Blunt. It's super
yeah,
funny.
like
It's not like one answer. It's a lot of factors coming together to
I
make
know.
this weird thing that's going on. I'm just wondering, which do you think? Let me ask you this then. Which do you think is more prevalent? Do you think it's more of an issue of people don't want to go to the movies, or do you think it's more of an issue of people are like, there's a lack of imagination going on with movies? And unless it's like a big time event movie that I feel like I need to be a part of, I'm not going to go see it in theaters.
Hmm, that that's a better question. I think people are still willing to go to the movies. I mean, and maybe it's a mix of like the Barbenheimer, like the eventization
Hmm.
of that drew in so much money. The billion-dollar movie happened with
Hmm.
Barbie, but I think just judging on people like myself and the friends I know around this area, like we'll still all go to see movies like something like Godzilla minus one that was
Okay.
interesting and creative. And Godzilla's not a new concept, but it
Hmm.
was a pretty new take on that. I think that people are still going to go, and I
Hmm.
don't think that they've been discouraged heavily, but
Okay.
it is a weird state
We
for
could do a
movies.
whole like show just on that. What do you think Star Wars needs to do? Because Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Disney are a big studio. What does Star Wars need to do to avoid what George Lucas is talking about, where he's talking about how there's no imagination anymore? We want to just do something that we want to retread a story that's already been told 1,000 times with characters maybe we've seen, or just remake something. How does Star Wars avoid falling into that? And maybe you could talk about projects that are coming up or ongoing already. How does Star Wars continuously reinvent itself? Because it's been around for so long
Yeah.
that it becomes challenging to not just deliver the same thing and be like, oh, I've seen this before. Like, how does Star Wars continue to be imaginative and reinvent itself now and close to year 50?
Yeah. I think a good way to avoid staleness is like what they're doing with the Ray movie. It is beyond anything we know. It's not
Mhm.
a direct sequel to anything, it's brand new. So you have to make a new story. You have to make something creative and imaginative to get that movie off the ground and
Right.
to get that in theaters. So that's a good project to dump time into. And then
Mhm.
we've got the Dawn of the Jedi movie, which again, it has to be kind of creative. There's no like framework for what that even needs to look like. There's maybe some
Right.
legends books, but like that's like a free just big sandbox of like what you want to do. So
Mhm.
those are good uh pools to draw just creativity from and pour into. So I
Okay.
mean, I think we need to just keep pushing the timeline forward or finding very, very empty spots of our sacred canon timeline to
Mhm.
go explore where you aren't bottled into, well, we know this movie happened before by 1 year and then this one happened
Mhm.
after it by 1 year. So you do have to like really lock in for what your story can even be.
Okay.
I think we need to maybe get away from that, which it doesn't seem like we're doing that a ton. We've got The
Okay.
Mandalorian, which we know how things kind of have to end with the sequel
Mhm.
trilogy. So continuing to find open pockets, very, very open pockets of
Like
the
just open
timeline.
pockets, and
Yeah.
part of it is Star Wars needs to, and I think that the Rey movie could do this. I think that the Acolyte has the potential to do this on the TV side, but more importantly, I think it's this Dawn of the Jedi movie. There
Mm,
needs to be like a new generation of characters and an audience that it's like it feels like completely new again.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the Rey
Exactly.
movie can do that, as you're talking about, like expanding something different, but it still is intertwined with the Skywalker
It
saga.
is. Yeah.
And the Dawn of the Jedi movie to me is going to be the big question mark, because I think the Ray movie will do well. I think it's going to do well. I really hope it will eventually. I think that, these other projects they have in the works, are going to do reasonably well. What does a movie look like that is completely unattached from everything Star Wars that we know of? Because I wonder, like, what do people view as, like, is Star Wars just the Skywalker saga, and what happened before that? Is that something that people will still turn up for to see, and will that attract new people who maybe haven't seen a lot of stuff and they're like, oh, I can go see this because it's not connected? Or does this giant prequel turn people away from that? It's going to be curious. But like you said, like, I hope studios listen to what George says. Not that George is
Yeah.
the, answer to all problems in cinema, but there is, I think, a growing sentiment among fans of this like lack of imagination that is existing here. And I hope we, can find a way to move beyond that. This is another comment. He basically, I just wrote, movies are movies, when he was asked about like how Martin Scorsese, has recently called Marvel movies like not cinema.
Yeah, I saw
And
that
they
part.
asked George, like, what do you think about stuff like that? And he goes, cinema like is the art of the moving image. If the image
Yes.
moves, it's cinema. And he just kind of left it at that.
Yeah.
What did you? And he's he joked around. He's like, I think Marty has changed his stance on that a little bit, or whatever. But what do you like? What were your thoughts on just like that little comment from George? Like subtle, but it was there.
Yeah, yeah. I think he has such a beautiful way of answering questions and telling you what he really thinks without having to give you specific, granular little answers. So,
Right.
him saying that I think is a good way to say, like, you should have a little bit more respect. You shouldn't be like hating on these Marvel movies or whatever movies. It is art. Um, it's cinema. So that's kind of his
Sometimes.
answer where he leaves it at. He doesn't get into like what I thought of Captain America was or anything like that. Which he didn't need to, but
It's probably like, do you honestly think George Lucas sat down and watched like Thor, Love and Thunder? Like, there's no way this man's watching these two goats screaming at each other at the age of 78. Like, I cannot imagine George watching like Thor, Love
yeah,
and Thunder. Maybe he did, but it was funny because, like anything, there are different genres of film, right? There's different genres of
for sure.
everything. But even within like what a film is, like there's different layers to the type of film. Like you watch some movies and you're like this movie was made to change the way people think or feel about something or to
Yes,
educate people in something, or this was made to stir up feelings that maybe you have suppressed and we're trying to bring that out of you. It's like that's the power of cinema. And I think what Scorsese, some of these people have said about these Marvel movies is they're like cash grab, low level of media literacy needed. Like you're just kind of being spoon fed like a storyline. I think that's.
yeah,
I don't want to sound like an a-hole when I say this, like an ass, because
yeah.
I do
I know,
enjoy like superhero. Because I enjoy superhero movies, like most of them. But
as
there
I do
is
too.
sometimes, and I think this is some of the Marvel movies where it's like I feel like I'm being spoon fed what an actual deep story is, and then there's people who are like, oh, that was so deep, like it hits, and I'm like, have you like gone and watched like some of these like some other films, like and it's one of those
Do you watch non-Marvel movies?
like I feel like a snob sometimes though when
Yeah,
I'm like, I ask them like, what are your like 5 favorite movies, and they're like, it's like Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Infinity War, and like 5 of their 5 favorite movies are all like superhero like Marvel movies. Part of me is just kind of like, okay, like can we watch something besides that every once in a while? But I do appreciate George saying what he said, because at the end of the day, these are all movies, and the movie industry is only going to bounce back and grow again if they're working together and not trying to tear each other down either. Um,
absolutely.
because they're just like Marvel has a big group of fans that are always going to go see those movies. Like, I don't want there to be people who might enjoy those and they feel like attacked for loving Marvel. And so they're like guilted into not going and seeing the movie because they don't want to be like, seen as like, oh, this is like a Marvel shill or whatever. That's just, doing whatever they want. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so I appreciate George saying the image moves, it's cinema. And
it
that's
is
just the way
cinema.
it is.
Yeah.
Last thing, and then we'll get out of here. George talked about when Star Wars came out. When it came out,
Yes.
people lined up around the block. I told Alan Ladd Jr., who was president of the studio at the time, look, all science fiction films do well in the first week. That's just the way it is. Let's not worry about lines around the block in the first week. They just like science fiction films. And then I went off to Hawaii to be on the beach, and Steven Spielberg and I sat around and made sandcastles and things. And then some of my friends from the United States called and said, turn on Walter Cronkite tonight, turn on the news. I turned on and he did a whole thing about what a phenomenon it was. And that's when I finally realized that it was indeed a phenomenon. Not a lot there in terms of like groundbreaking information. Like we kind of knew about the whole, I knew about the whole Hawaii thing before, but
Yeah.
talking about the image of like younger, like almost 50 years ago, like Spielberg and Lucas, what, in their like 30s, I guess, probably like something like that, or
Yeah,
like early 40s, and they're sitting around in their late 30s, early 40s, making sandcastles in Hawaii, when like the biggest project of Lucas's like career, the thing that's going to turn him into, maybe the most important person in film history, like, you know what I mean, like, and he's just
yeah.
sitting around making sandcastles, like, I don't care, we'll see how it, we'll see
We'll
how it
see.
turns out in a month. What did you think when you heard him say that? Because that was pretty funny.
I mean, yeah, it's hilarious that this thing that we know, we have the foreknowledge that it just goes on to shape how movies are made and just
Mhm.
pop culture. And he's sitting there like, it might miss. Actually, I think I don't even want to be here for that. I'm just gonna go to Hawaii with Spielberg and make a sand Death Star, and he's gonna come over and kick it over. So it's funny how kind of flippant he was with like, eh, it'll do well in the first week. They all do, but mine's probably not special or anything. I poured my love into it, but
We'll see.
we'll
It's like, we'll
see.
see. If it
We'll
does, it
see.
does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I also love the idea. So when I picture, let me ask you this: you're picturing George Lucas on the beach making sandcastles. There's zero chance in your mind right now you're picturing George Lucas shirtless in a swimsuit, because I cannot picture George Lucas not wearing dad jeans, a button-up shirt out of the 70s, and like a pair of like dad sneakers, like those like
That's his iconic fit.
yes, like I cannot, even in this interview, he's wearing like jeans
Yeah,
or whatever. He's wearing the thing, but like he's wearing like the shirt. I cannot, I feel like he, even back then, he's sitting on the beach in jeans and the sneakers and the dad shirt that looks like it's been in the closet for a long
he's like, I
time.
got sand in my New
You're
Balance. Come
you're at
on.
the estate sale for the house. This house, this couple lived in for 50 years, and all the shirts from the estate sale all look the same, just a different shade of color, different type of plaid, stripe, whatever.
50 flannels.
Um, 50 flannels. And I cannot picture George Lucas sitting there in swim trunks and like a t-shirt on the beach, doing anything. I
He was
100%
ripped back then.
him. Imagine George, shredded George Lucas. Like, yeah. Oh my gosh. That's George Lucas. That's actually where the body of Barnabas Vim from the High Republic comics came into play. Or
Oh,
Water Wars
deep
Kit
cut.
Fisto. Water Wars Kit Fisto, Clone Wars season 3, season 4. That's I think it's 4. Season 4. That's the George Lucas Hawaii cut.
They actually
Right
edited Kit
there.
Fisto's head onto George Lucas's body.
Which actually used to be green. Okay, now we've gotten like a little
Okay,
bit
sorry.
where we've derailed the conversation here, but it's perfectly fine. We're just having fun with Star Wars. So again, George Lucas, it's always great when we can get some comments from him, a brief interview, something like that. Put the mic in front of him, now and then. Like, let's get him on a
Please,
show every once in a while. Like,
please.
please. Like, obviously George owes us nothing, but anytime
Yeah.
he's 80 years old, anytime he speaks out, it's pretty enlightening. It's fun to listen to. I enjoy it. Any final like comments on the George Lucas stuff before we get out of here?
So I watched not only the video that I did send you, but there's also him accepting the award at
Right.
the con. And I just loved, just to simply put it, like how deep and beautiful his relationship with Francis Ford Coppola is.
Mhm.
How they really grew up, and they just really bonded over being two young people in this movie making industry that was kind of burgeoning and changing and would change majorly after
Mhm.
their works that they attributed to it. So
Right.
I loved seeing how it wasn't hard. You couldn't miss it. Like they had
They
such a
started a company
fondness for each
together.
other. Yeah. So they started a company together.
Mhm.
So I love that. I love
Yeah,
those
that
two.
that was pretty phenomenal stuff to listen to. I also enjoyed when he talked about like streaming and how he was pretty
Yeah.
upfront. He goes, "I have no idea how this is going to go. I have no
Yeah.
idea how this might change everything." He goes, "It was kind of like when George Lucas came in, he ushered in a change of the film industry. And then again in the early 2000s, he ushered in another giant change in the
Yes,
film
he did.
industry. I mean, you could argue no one's had a bigger like thumbprint and, imprint on film than Lucas, you could argue.
Yeah.
Agree. And here again, he goes, streaming's happening. This is all taking place. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. And so I'm just going to go ahead and make $7 billion and retire, which is it's kind of like it's such a power move. Like,
it is.
I'm just going to sell my classroom at my school for $7 billion, and I'm checking out. Like, I'm checking out. I wish I could do that.
Wish I could do that.
Sadly, I couldn't. Can't do that. But George, is in a different place in his life. So anytime George Lucas speaks, it's awesome. Thank you guys for listening. Once again, check out Star Wars Newsnet for everything Star Wars. We cover literally everything in the Star Wars universe. We probably had an article come out about a toy this week. I mean, for all I know, like, we talk about toys, games, movies, comics, everything that has to do with our favorite galaxy. Stay tuned for future stuff here on the channel. Please like and subscribe. We want to get those subscribers up because we want to be able to do like more things for you guys every single week. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, please just leave us a little 5-star review. Give us a comment. What did you think when you heard George Lucas's comments at Cannes Film Festival? We would love to hear. Until next time, everyone, for Light and Life, we're all the Republic.